Okay. Welcome to Reality Coaching for Writers, where we offer, what do we offer, Diana?
No fluff, just the real stuff to help you succeed.
Right. And so today the question is, how can you ensure that your writing project, your book project becomes a hit and not a miss? And Diana, we've talked about doing this in the past. We haven't really put any of our projects up on our writerscoach.us website, and we've got, a Google business page, and we don't really spend a whole lot of time promoting any of the projects that we work on. But you and I do an awful lot of work on the back end, working
Right.
with clients, working with projects. And I guess my thinking is we're a little bit like the delivery doctor in a hospital. We're not, it's not about us, right? It's about our client and the baby. But today we're gonna walk through some of the projects that we've worked on, and maybe share some of the insights, some of the successes, some of the misses, some of the frustrations of what we ran into. So we're going to see if this works. We're going to try to share a screen, and
Okay.
here we go.
I'm ready.
Let's see if that works. All right. So that's kind of our landing page. And let's talk about this one first. So why don't you walk the audience through a little bit about the home for Min Soo, and talk about this project a little bit.
Okay. This is a project near and dear to my heart, but truthfully, all of my projects are. But this particular book is the most recent one that I've worked on with Eddie. And I did the editing and then passed it over to you, Eddie. And but the background is I met the mother of Min Soo at a writers conference many years ago, and we remained friends on Facebook and social media, and just remembered birthdays. And so when Min was probably about 16, he's 30 now. So I followed his birthdays, his first job, his um, all the parts of his young adult life. And he's had many surgeries, different things he's faced, challenges as a child. But the story is so inspirational. And it was my last literary agent project. And I pitched it to many publishers, and so many of them came back and said, Diana, I love this, but boy, we just don't know how we do the marketing. And Min Soo has a little bit of developmental challenges. And so they just weren't sure how he'd interview, how he'd, be able to promote the book. But we did get one large publisher on the hook. We even had a Zoom interview with them. And then in the end, they passed. And so that's when we then really did an extra special polishing. And then we passed it up to you, Eddie. So then you took over and you could share on your end.
So I don't know if anybody can see this or not, but this is what I received from Min and Sarah and Brian. So it's obviously the book, right? And there's the cover and all that. But they included with it pirate patch, pirate socks, a nice note inside. So yeah, it's one of the fun parts about kind of the work we do. You get the book, and you get the thank you that comes with it. And really, my part on the back end, Diana, was pretty minimal. I mean, all I had to do was walk them through the production side of it. So you handled the heavy lifting on that one, because you were the editor. You were the one doing the editing on this. So yeah.
Well, and then we've also helped with some. Oh, by the way, in my gift, I received the signed book, but I also received a superhero cape that said special agent. So, along with a couple little things that were just are real precious to me. But then the other aspect and thing I've helped with is the launch, the book launch. I've helped Sarah with book launching. You and I've both done that, but helped her, know what steps, what things to cover in the book launch. And Eddie, we talked about misses, and maybe this is a place where when authors are looking at publishing their own book, hiring an editor, hiring someone to help them get it into print here, like we did, they need to understand what work it is and how much work they're going to, have in the future just to launch the book, to get it into readers' hands. So that's a big part. And if the people don't understand that job, that reality, which you and I painstakingly try to prepare them for, then they can be very disappointed, and their book can end up being a beautiful project, beautiful end result, but not finding the readers.
Yeah, no, that is absolutely true. In fact, let's move on. So this is one that I worked on. This was a children's book. It was a large spread book, and that was a good lead into kind of what I ran into with this one, because the author, Anne, I met her at the Asheville Christian Writers Conference last year, and she's prolific. She has lots of writing projects that she wanted to get out. But her time is limited because of what she does, or all the other work that she does. And so I have to step in and pretty much be the project manager on all the production side of this. And there were lots of issues with this project. And so we'll talk a little bit about what it means to be a publisher, be your own publisher. We talk about self-publishing as a term. And to your point, we rarely dwell on what it means to be a self-publisher, just a basic publisher. And so this book ran into numerous obstacles, and we were really thankful when we finally got it live through Ingram Spark and got it up on Amazon and the other bookstores. And I don't remember all the issues, Diana. I do remember one, though, that we had the cover size wrong, because it's a children's book. I think we started out with an 8.5 by 11 size or something like that, something to that effect. Well, it turned out, because it's a kid's book, it needed to be not 8.5 by 11, 11 by 8.5. In other words, it's wider than it is tall, because it's a kid's board book, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And that tripped us up, because that's just not something that I normally run into. I don't spend a ton of time working on kids' books, so I didn't even think about the size. And we sent that off to the designer, and she made it 8.5 by 11. Then we went to upload it. It was the wrong size. We had to go back. And all those things take time, and then they also take money, because now you're going back to the illustrator and the designer and asking them to reflow the cover. And like I said, I'm not going to dwell on all the issues I ran into, but that's just one for this one. That if you're a publisher, you need to be aware of all those small elements, because to your point, it's not going to happen via magic.
Right. And do you know how whatever happened to Emily has been doing as far as selling?
I don't know. I don't. Normally, when I pass the projects off, once we finally deliver the baby, it's kind of, again, like the delivery doctor. You don't follow up and say, well, how's the baby doing? Leave that to the pediatrician, right? So I don't log back into the Ingram Spark account unless the author asks me to come back in and check on something. So I haven't really looked at the sales of whatever happened. And it's a really interesting book. And it was the book itself, Anne created it for counselors, because the book is about two girls who are best friends growing up, and one of them transitions into a boy. And it's a kind of a heartbreaking story about, kids' friendships being severed by the change of one. And of course, in this case, it just happens to be about, a gender transition, but it can happen with a child moving away. The same thing happens. You lose touch with a childhood friend, and you're going, well, whatever happened to Emily? And that's the main theme of the book. But in working on the project, I was thinking of my boyhood, childhood best friend, Mark, whose dad was in the Marine Corps, and they moved from Raleigh to Parris Island because he was moving down there as, to work as a drill instructor rather than a recruiter for the Marine Corps. And it rocked my world losing Mark. I'm still not sure I ever got over losing my best friend Mark, but we did everything. So that was an interesting book to work on for me. This is one I'm working on right now, and if you like the cover, and Diane, I'd be love to get your impressions on this, of what you think of the cover.
Content beast. Well, purple's my favorite color. But I don't know if it's that dense of a purple is the best. Who's the audience?
Well, the audience is for people that are writing content that are trying to get their message out there. So it's like a marketing book, a communications book. And the premise behind it is you've got to, clearly what it says in the tagline, you got to create content that's going to connect with the audience. I mean, we talk about.
Yeah, I love the title and I love the subtitle. Yeah. And I love the beast. I would just lighten the purple a little bit because it's not going to be for everybody. Some people might think it's a children's book.
Right. It could be, but in the right categories, it's not going to be confused too much. But I'm like you look at it and going, this is kind of almost like a Pac-Man thing. I can see this guy. Eating all the little,
yes.
But I like the premise because for me, the title works because
it's good.
We talk about content being the king, and content. You got to have good content. You can't put out fluff, right? You got to put out real stuff, right? And that's hard to do. Right. But the flip side of that content is that you create the content, it becomes a beast. It can eat you. It can consume your life, right? And so that's part of what goes into this is how do you create content without losing your life to the content beast,
Ooh, I want to read this one.
Well,
I'll be a beta reader.
There you go.
And can I be a beta reader?
Well, so this one's been an interesting project because clearly the author knows his message and his audience, right? So he brought, he brought the cover. We gave it to the cover designer, but she really just replicated what he already had and put it in a template that's going to work for Ingram Spark and KDP, to get the flow correctly, the template correct. But he knew everything going in of what the content needed to be. And so it's been a very granular, detailed-oriented project for us, going back and making small corrections all the time. Even today, we're working on one where because most books are full justified when they're flowed. They're not left justified, they're not right justified, they're fully justified. It's a block of text, right? Well, in doing that, the kerning gets compressed between words sometimes. So there's not always the same space between each word like you would in a Microsoft Word document, right? It has to fit when it's fully justified. So we're working through that because some words, it almost looks like there's not a space between a period and the next letter. Okay. So for those, you have to go in and go, okay, if we move one word down from the end of the line to the next line, that'll create more space on that compressed line. But what happens to the next line is now you're going to have the same issue with two other words, right? And so this is one of those projects where, and I'm happy to work with the author on this because he's good at what he does. I'm happy to work with him, but it is these very granular details because he wants his project perfect, right? And so we just throw that out there as, maybe I mentioned Anne, she's one that's really busy with whatever happened to Emily. She's doing a lot of things, so I have to manage the project. I have to be the one kind of seeing the big picture. In this case, I've got the author coming behind me, really managing the project, and it's just flowing through me.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, that's very nice.
And I'm just wondering, Diane, have you ever run into that kind of work on the writing, on the editing side for you, where you've had to either almost do all the project work or the author is so involved that it's just really they're funneling the changes to you and you're just making small tweaks?
Well, for the most part, I generally do a lot of book doctoring. because I'm getting material. I work with a lot of pastors, so they give me a lot of their material from, their sermons. And so it requires a heavy content editing and organization. So, but there are some that it's just the little details and the, polishing it. When I was working with Sarah, Min Soo's mother, they did so, weren't they easy to work with, Eddie? Because boy, you just advise them and they pick up the ball and they run with it. And that story is so inspirational and moving. But they also had pre-sales of over 100 books. So that's very good for the start. They have a dedicated launch team. So I wanted to give them kudos for that before we moved on. But generally, the work for me, I sometimes have to unformat. The biggest key is when you're bringing your material to an editor, please do not pre-format it. Put page breaks in, because all of that interior content is going to change. So just the regular margins, normal margins, headings, everything, just leave it in a simple state when you give it to the editor. And you don't worry about formatting it until we pass it on to you, right, Eddie, because otherwise that takes me a lot of time that you're paying me for to deformat it. Because, and some people, you have to put the page numbers in with the header and footer tool, because if you try to put a page number in outside of the header or footer tool, then the page number ends up in the middle of the page, right, and you're constantly having to move all of that, because editing is tightening, eliminating words, so the pages are going to change. Right. Your word count is going to change. So it's best not to do any formatting prior to the editing process.
That's right. That's true. So which one's next? So this is another one. This has been kind of fun, and I really haven't had to do a whole lot with this one. Jordan's on the Pond. I met Jim again, this is one of those that came to us from the Asheville Christian Writers Conference, and I think I met Jim probably 3 years ago. He was a national park ranger for years, or manager, or whatever. I mean, he worked in national parks up in Maine, and we were brainstorming on him doing a mystery series. But in the meantime, he's descendant of the ancestors that were Jordans on the Pond up in the Maine National Park. And he wanted to write the backstory because he knew the backstory. I mean, his family were the Jordans, right?
Nice.
And so he had all this information, and he created basically a book through Lulu, I think, just for his family. And then I was like, well, if it's interesting information, if it's historical, I said, if it's history, somebody will always buy a history book, somebody that's interested in the area. And so he brainstormed and thought about it for a while. And finally, recently, last month, he finally released the book, and so this is one where it was a client that really just wanted to basically create almost like a memoir for his family. It's just that his family was involved in something that's a historical event in a park. And he decided to flip that and make it into a book. And so now he's, selling this book in gift shops up in the Maine area, and he's got orders. I mean, there are orders coming in for the book from bookstores, So,
awesome.
Yeah. But that was kind of a fun project, because it's not one that I really expected. This is, Jim didn't set out to write a book necessarily. I guess that's the point. He just had a book and he wanted to get it out, And,
yeah. Well, it's a beautiful cover. I love that.
Yeah, I think and he had a lot of he had all the illustrations from the inside, but I think Elena did a great job on the cover on this one. I think it looks like it ought to be in a gift store in a park,
Mm-hmm.
a park bookshop. Yeah,
Yes,
that's a good one.
beautiful quality. Mm-hmm.
And this is one that it's just released. It's Shelley's story, and this is a novel by a pastor, and it's about abuse. And this is one of those where the pastor just wanted to get the story out about this individual and what happened to her, as kind of a warning, maybe, of how women and all of us really just need to be careful about who we run with and what can happen if we're not, if we're not watching, because it's a tragic story. And so I didn't have any much work. I didn't have any work really to do on the editing side of this. The author kind of wanted to stick with the story the way it was, so we just kind of worked through the proofing stages up to a point, and then we ran it through the production. And again, I like the cover. I think the cover does well.
Oh, it does.
The challenge with this one, what we've run into is that because we haven't loaded it into KDP, it was only loaded through Ingram Spark. So the changes to get the book changed is taking much longer than it normally would. I mean, we're up to, I don't know, the fourth or fifth day, and we're still waiting for Ingram Spark to approve the last series of uploaded files. So in the meantime, and so this is just a tip, a warning to authors that if you're using Ingram Spark, you need to make sure your book is perfect before you load it and release it, because the book was released and it was put on for sale, and then the author found a few errors that he wanted to go back and correct, and he did. But in the meantime, the older version is still up and being shipped from Ingram Spark because Ingram hasn't approved the latest updated version, right?
Uh-huh.
Right. So that's just a warning that, you can go back into Ingram Spark and make changes later, but it may take a week or more before you can get the changes out through Ingram Spark. And in the meantime, those books are shipping. For example, in this case, if Amazon decides to carry inventory, then they're going to buy not one copy, but they might buy 3 copies of Shelley's story. If the sales look pretty good, then Amazon may buy 3 copies, bring it in, put it in inventory in the warehouse. Those are the versions with the mistakes in them. And until they sell those 3, they're not going to get the version with an update. Right. So that's just one of those. Make sure that you've got everything perfect before it goes live. And of course, no book is perfect.
What's that percentage you quote?
Oh yeah, 99.9%. And so in this case, I don't remember the word count for Shelley's story, but let's say it was 60,000 words. That means there's going to be 60 typos in the book at 99.9%. And I don't know that there are that many typos in the book, but that's just, you need to know these things, and then you also need to have a lot of patience, because patience and grace, because if the mistakes are there, you've just got to learn how to deal with it and not lose it, not flip out.
Well, and you said patience, and I'll just interject this real quick before you go to the next slide, but don't be in a rush to get it, up and published.
Right.
Like you said, if they would have taken the time maybe and had a proofreader look at it. I know with A Home for Min Soo, we had 2 proofreaders go through it, and each one of them caught something. So hopefully it's perfect now, but we weren't in a rush. We had to just go through the process and make sure every detail was taken care of, because like you said, once it's up there, then you can be proud of it, and you're not going to be trying to come from the back end trying to play catch up with Amazon. Yeah.
And that's a great point for self-published authors, because you don't have a deadline. I mean, you are making your own deadline, and if you do have a deadline, if you create an arbitrary deadline, like maybe you want to get it out by Christmas, and maybe that's the thing that's driving you.
Right.
To your point, that's great unless you've got a book with a lot of mistakes, and then you did yourself a great disservice.
Right.
So that is one real advantage the self-publisher has, is you can create your deadline. So I'm with you. Don't get in a hurry. Don't give yourself an arbitrary deadline. Nick, you want to talk a little bit about Nick and forgiveness and how this one came to us?
Yes. Well, Nick Honorkamp was my pastor for 10 years, and I used to be his editor. He had a blog, and then I would he had so many books in him, and I was constantly encouraging him to attend a writer's conference, to really carve out some time for writing. And so I remember the first time he went to a writers conference. It was the Asheville Christian Writers Conference in Asheville at the Billy Graham Training Center. And I was teaching that year, and every time he'd pass me, he would go, he just loved it. It just inspired him, and it totally focused him to realize that he did have a lot of books in him. So he actually has 2 other books that are written, partially edited, but then this book came to him when another pastor asked him a question, and he just sat down and wrote it, and I had the privilege of being his editor. And then, of course, we passed the book over to you, Eddie. And I want to say, for readers, this book talks about forgiveness in a very fresh way, with new revelation, biblically sound, but you're going to look at forgiveness in a new way. It's not something that's just been said before. It's really worthy. So we passed it over to you, Eddie, and then.
Yeah, and then again, this is one of those that for me, it's just production work. It's just getting it into the cover designer's hands, into the interior design team, flowing it, getting it up on KDP and Ingram Spark. It's logistics. I mean, there's not a lot of glamour in that, but it's the part that has to be done, and that's what I'm happy to do. And I do a lot of this for clients. Sometimes I do it and I don't even charge them for it if it's really simple. I just walk them through the process. And we'll close out in a little bit why what we're doing and why we're talking today is so important.
Well, and on Nick, one thing he shared with me is that in working with a cover designer, she asked him a question that surprised him, but since has really helped him with his branding. She asked him what his favorite colors were. Mm-hmm. And these are the colors in the book cover that you see here. And he has since used those same colors for his website. And it was a question that helped him really take it way further than this single book.
Yeah, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if I can figure out. There we go. So the yellow cake. This is by Roger, and this is another one. I don't want to call it self-help. I don't know what you put these kind of like Jeffrey's book and Roger's book. I'm not sure exactly where you put them in. I'm going to call these marketing books, sales promotion books. Maybe industry specific is better. And so again, this is one of those that the cover. Roger had some ideas about what he wanted on the front of the cover, and it was the image of a cake and had a background image with it. And the reason I like this one is because he was able to kind of back off. He knew what he wanted in the cover. He knew the concept, but he allowed the cover designer, Elena, to go out and actually create a cover that I think works. Mm-hmm. And it's not.
I like
it. It's not time sensitive. Because it's an illustration, the image will always work. You won't look at it later and go, okay, we don't eat that kind of cake anymore, kind of thing. It's generic enough. It should always work. And to your point, I haven't really followed up with Roger to see how sales have gone with this one, but I know he was. I think he was pretty pleased with the project when it was finished, and he liked the process, and so that was kind of an easier one for us to kind of walk our way through. Now this one is from one of my clients. This one came to me from Anne. So Anne knows Reverend Sky Starr, and Sky has, again, lots of books in her. This one is about gun violence. And so, again, this is one where I'm spending a ton of work on as project manager, because she gets calls she's on call 24/7, dealing with victims and those who are impacted by gun violence, mass shootings, okay, anywhere in the North America.
Wow.
So she can only dedicate so much time to the project, and it's not something we have a difficult time scheduling time to catch up, because we can schedule it, but she may not be available because there may be an emergency she has to go to. So this is more of an academic book, but I like the way the cover came out because it's got a nice blend of colors on it, and it's dealing with a very difficult topic. I mean, gun violence and mass shootings, and how you cope with it, and how the victims cope with it is an important topic. And I think the book will do well because, again, she's got the personality and the platform. She just needed the books to go with it. And so we're going to continue to work on other books on this one in this series. But this, again, is one of those issues where this morning, and here's the caveat issue, I guess, with this one. There were two changes that needed to be made on the cover. One of them was a barcode issue. That was on me. That was my fault. So I had to go ahead and change the barcode. It passed Ingram Spark the first time, but this morning, Ingram Spark, it kept kicking back and saying there was an error with the cover template. I was like, okay. So before I did anything this morning, I tried 4 times to get the updated cover live. Couldn't get it live. Finally, I went back to the original cover template that we uploaded through Ingram Spark that they actually released, and it still gave the same error. So I throw this out there because one of the issues with Ingram Spark is their infrastructure. I'm not going to say it's in shambles, but it's certainly not as stable as it was in the past. So if you're watching this video, just understand sometimes it's not the problem. You don't have the problem. Sometimes the problem's on Ingram Spark's side. And you can reach out to their customer service team, but you may not get a response from them for 3 days. So if you're watching, I will just say this. If you run into formatting, you see an error with a formatting issue, if it says your title's in revision and you're trying to figure out why is it taking so long, sometimes the only thing you can do is just log out, wait a day, come back in, and then you'll realize everything's fixed and working. And that's on Ingram Spark side. So don't panic, don't get in a fit. They just seem to have more issues now than they did way before COVID. COVID really hurt Ingram Spark a lot. I think it must have lost a lot of their customer service people, and their infrastructure is not what it was. I don't remember, Diana, did you work with Stephen on this one at all? Okay.
Yeah.
I think this one came to me through Nick. So again, this is back to a Nick, and Stephen came to me. Stephen's a pastor up in I think Waynesville, North Carolina area. So in a way, he's a little bit like Nick. He had a book in him that he needed to get out because he has a platform and he's speaking, and people are going, well, this is great, but rather than taking notes, can you just write a book and we'll buy your book? So this one came to us. I like the title, and I like the cover. I think the cover kind of works for what we're trying to do. And it's a practical guide for knowing God and his will. Hey, who doesn't want that, right? And for Stephen, he again, it's one of those things where when he speaks, he needs books to sell. And that was the main motivation. And he had an audience that was asking for it.
That's a great cover. I like it.
Yeah. And we'll close out with this one. This one is from The Kingdom Election from Mike Wolfe. Mike is prolific like me in pontificating on things that have to do with scriptural nature. So Mike and I share that in common. So this is about what the kingdom election is and what does it mean to be, quote, elected into the kingdom and all that. And it's kind of a big book, but this was the cover he kind of picked. He liked the idea. He didn't want it to be a sour cover. He wanted it to be an enlightening cover. And so that's why he went with the cover that he did. And because we're kind of pressed on time, I'm going to switch and use Mike as an example of things you need to watch for
Okay.
Because Mike is the one that Amazon shut down his KDP